active. I'm looking for the scene to have a strong viewpoint. I'm looking for it to be concrete. And I'm looking for it to be non-flabby, meaning that you've cut out the repetitive language. You've cut out the, you've trimmed down basically anything that doesn't need to be there and left the stuff that does need to be there. You've taken out the passive voice. You've made your descriptions more concrete. There should be an E on that. But, you know, there was a great example in the writing group today. I hope whoever it was doesn't mind me showing it, where they said, you know, what was the pain coursed through their brain, or what was it, something like that? One of yours, was it Aaron's? Yeah, it was yours. And know what? We all write sentences like that in first drafts, and we all have them in last drafts sometimes. But what you know, a scene where they say, you know, pain coursed through him, instead saying, you know, he moved his arm and winced in pain. Those, one is more concrete. We can see an image to it. The other is an abstraction. Pain is coursing, okay, but let's do something. All right, let's have active, strong viewpoints, concrete language, non-flabby scenes. That's what's going to shine in this writing, because I can't give you a ton of advice on overarching plots and things like that, okay? This is what I'll be looking for. Now, as I've said before, this is an elective class with a lot of you being upperclassmen. I'm not gonna you know, stomp your face in the ground grade-wise. If you've done what I've told you to do, if you have come every week, read your submissions, you hit your 30,000 words, you're going to be just fine, okay? If your submission is really terrible, you might get an A- instead of an A. But your grade is mostly on self-discipline and doing the things that I told you to do, all right? It's easy to get a good grade in this class if you're willing. Well, it's simple to get a good grade in this class. How about that? Do the writing, give the feedback, do your reading, and then your grade, your final I will grade qualitatively, but since most of your grade is built up based on doing the stuff, it's you know, as long as you're not dreadful, you'll be fine. Even if there's no one in this class that's dreadful, so you'll be fine as long as you are actually doing a revision of it. If I can look back at your original scene and say, hey, they put some effort into polishing this, they're getting better, you're going to be fine. Okay. All righty. So this week is your week to launch me off into whatever random direction you would like me to go in. If you don't have questions for me, then I'll have to pick something boring and talk about that instead, like grammar. Yes, grammar. What's that?
I said I really like grammar.
You really like grammar? You're a grammarian? Okay.
Teaching grammar.
Okay, okay.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I get the sense from some of your writing that some of these stories have been bouncing around in your head, thank you, for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you usually compile these on paper, or do they just kind of bounce around in your head until you're ready to start writing?
I do a little bit of each. If it's an idea that's not connected to a story yet, I will sometimes stick it in my file of cool things that need to be used someday. Others are so cool to me, they just keep bouncing around and never need to be added to that file, particularly if a novel is forming. Sometimes when a novel just suddenly comes together, that's when I sit down and write it. I often explain novels as made up of different pieces that have been bouncing around in my head long enough to interact with one another in an interesting way. But other times, you know, a lot of times books come from me saying, wow, I really love this type of story. I want to do some of those someday. And I sit thinking for years on what's a take on that story that I can do that will be cool? What's a take on that story that will... And when something comes to me, I open up a new thing I call a book guide, and I start writing down plot, setting, characters, just so I have that when I want it.
Fleshed out.
Yeah, and I just write down whatever I have. So for me, a new book is plot. I open up a new Word file, name the book something. It doesn't have to be the final title. And then I write plot, setting, character. I make each of those in Microsoft Word heading number 1, or whatever it is, outline level 1. And then I go from there. Put in whatever I've thought of. If it's just a brainstorming document like this, I'll just list down all the things I have under those, and I won't organize them in any way. For character, it's just going to be character concepts, conflicts usually, or professions, or an emotional temperament. For setting, it's going to be an interesting magic or visual piece. And for plot, it's going to be, a moment I've imagined, one of those scenes that are important.
Follow-up question, this is going to be really subjective. When do you know when it's time to start on that idea?
It's a good question. When I either have a contract saying this needs to be in by this time, or when I'm excited about it. And oftentimes when I get done with a novel, and it's time for me to do a breather novel, I generally do a breather novel between projects. Whichever one I happen to be most excited about at that moment is the one I write. There could be 6 of these that have book guides growing for them that I want to write someday, and I'm only really excited about one of them at that moment. I've seen a movie that's like that, or I've had a breakthrough on that one recently, and so that's the one I write. Where the others, maybe if I'd finished this other book a month later, I would have written one of those. That goes for breather novels. I'm much more conscious on the mainline books, the Mistborn books, the Stormlight books.
Those are kind of always there.
That's kind of like, that's the spine, that's the backbone of what I wanted my career to be, are those 2 series and the Dragonsteel series. And everything else is kind of, sides to that is breathers between doing those stories. So, right, well, we're going to work our way back. We'll get to you next, but okay, I just want to work in order. So here, have an orange one. I don't like those.
Thank you.
Reader trust.
Yes.
If anybody else had written Way of Kings,
Yeah.
then it would not have gotten published or read.
Yep.
So there are some things that you can do as an advanced writer that you can't do as a getting into it writer.
Yes.
What are some other things besides just length of books that you want to avoid, not because it's bad, but because you don't have the trust built yet?
Promise of a big series, I would say. And any of these can be broken. You'll notice that Pat Rothfuss broke out with Name of the Wind, which is a very long book with a non-traditional story structure, breaking a lot of rules, so to speak. He had a lot of trouble breaking in. When he did, it was awesome. And there's a reason why we didn't publish Way of Kings as my second novel, even though the editor had it and it's the second book of mine he read after Elantris. And it's because of these things. I felt the readers needed to trust me first. So length of book. The other thing is learning curve. Way of Kings has a kick to the face learning curve. And unless you trust me as a writer, even if you trust me, those early chapters are difficult to get through. And I knew writing the book, this is the book I wanted to tell. That's one of those things. It's like, if I were reading this as a new author, I'd be like, man, your learning curve is off the charts. If I read Way of Kings, I'd be the same way. I'd be like, you're just being way too ambitious. But with the trust of the readers, it has become my best-selling and most popular book, because readers read it and like, oh, I trust Brandon, this is going to be awesome. And because of the foundation and groundwork I'm able to lay, I can write a book that is that much more awesome, at least in my opinion.
Okay.